In our journey of trying to understand what Hope Baptist Church is all about, we are called to worship. You may say, Eric, well, of course we are. This is what, we're in church, so that's what you do. But I want us to try and understand a little bit deeper what that is all about. I dare say that worship is one of those things that has caused probably maybe more confusion and variation than anything else in church. Now, the truth is, when people come into a church, and churches will do things in all different kinds of ways. There'll be some churches that the culture will be that you're stood about as stiff as you can be. When I come in that place, free at last, meeting face to face. There'll be some that'll be like that. There'll be some that will sort of do this kind of a thing. Free at last, meeting face to... Now some will be doing this kind of a thing. Now Sammy's sometimes back there washing the windows or doing something like... Sammy's back there sometimes doing this. Sometimes there'll be some people doing this. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Okay? There are all different kinds of personalities, and I am more of a reserved kind of chappy. Okay? That is who I am. And there's some who are just more out there, and that's okay too. God created us all in different kinds of ways. Isn't that right? Isn't that good? I'm so glad that not everyone looks like me. That would be terrible. I'm glad not everyone does things like me. That would be boring. I'm glad we've got the Doreens and the Joyces and the Lanre and the Fumis and the Simons and the Adams, all different sorts. And Severus and Michaela. Now, Michaela has a special gift. She does. From the very first day that they two visited what was Rosington Community Baptist Church over there in the other building, when Michaela smiled, it just was like a beam of sunshine. Did you ever? I don't know what there is about her, but she's just got this way of this sunshine. It's amazing. It's amazing. So we want to think about worship and what it is and how it works in our life. Now, I am going to get into a little bit of technical things, bit of history, some words, so don't be worried, okay? Don't be worried because we're going to come into the text, but I think it's important to try to understand some of these basic things first that may get a little bit technical, but don't worry. The word worship comes from an old English word, worthscape. Okay, worthscape. Let me give you a couple of bits. The first bit, that of worth, that means having great value. Okay, we know that. Okay, if something has great worth, it has great value, right? So bear that in mind. But then the next part, Skype, that word became our current bit, ship. Now, not the thing that goes in the water, but, for example, if you have a friendship with somebody, that means you have someone who is a friend, and they had this condition in that you have this relationship with them. So you have a friendship. So the idea of ship shows a quality or a condition. Now, let's move on. As time moved on, worship became to mean that you showed honor or respect to somebody. Now, we here in England, we understand that more than most of the countries around the world. Certainly in the States where I am from. Because even now, British magistrates, and I think this is correct, they are properly called your worship. Mayors in towns, when they're doing official kind of things, they are called your worship. Now, doesn't that seem strange? Now, from history, that's not strange because all it means is that you're showing respect or honor to someone who has a high level. But in our church context, we've now changed that, and we are now focusing on God who is at a very high level. Now, today, in our group of however many we have here, we have people of all different sorts. Now, we talked about the different ways we are acting in worship, but because of who I am, and because of I've talked to many people over time, I'm one of the blokes who you had to convince me about this whole thing of Christianity. I did not grow up as a Christian. I was curious about things, but I never sort of got it until later on in life. But you had to prove it to me. You had to show me something, not just say, well, there's the Bible, believe it or not. That's it. And maybe there's some who are here who struggle with worship. And I've talked to people who struggle on the emotional side of connecting with God. Because we're all kind of, we have the two halves of our brain. And I can't remember which one is which. One half is sort of the thinking, intellectual side. The other is the artsy, emotional kind of thing. And some of us are more one brain dominant than the other half. So some of us are more emotionally connected, some of us are more intellectually. And so what I want to challenge you with is this thing of worship is a combination. So some of us may struggle with the sort of relational side of connecting with God. And I want to particularly speak to you today because some of you other lot who are here really get into the worship and the songs and you get it. And maybe you don't struggle as much, but maybe you struggle with the other side. And we're going to talk about that as well. Imagine. Jack and Sue get married. Sue says, Jack, I love you. You're my sweetheart. I could sail off into the sunset with you every day of the week. You are my knight in shining armor. My Jack. Is that nice? Jack says, I'm glad I married you. Tea will be at 6 o'clock sharp every night. I play cards with the lads on Wednesday night, and I golf on Saturday and Sunday. You'll pay the bills by the 15th of every month. Now, what do you make to that? Is that marriage long for this earth? No. No. Jack didn't get that there's the emotional side of a relationship as well as the practical side of the relationship. And that's what I want us to think about today. Because I want us to understand let's see, my thing not working? No? Can you click? There we go. Okay, maybe this will work. We want to look at, for just a short bit now, some words in the New Testament. Now, here's where we don't want to get confused. But worship, true worship, is multidimensional. That means it has different parts. Yes, singing is part of it. Yes, prayer is part of it. Yes, gathering together like we did this morning is part of it, but it's not the only thing. Not the only thing. So here's a few words I want to give out to you. And the first one that is within the Bible, and you would pronounce this prasukane. Prasuneo. Praskuneo, there we go. Praskuneo, all right? So praskuneo, can we do that on the count of three? Can we give it a try? Praskuneo, count of three. 1, 2, 3, praskuneo. Well done. That's a word that is the most common word when translated as worship, and this means literally to bow down, to kiss towards, to prostrate or kneel before a king or God. This is the word that was used. You remember in Matthew chapter 4 when Jesus was in the wilderness and Satan appeared. And there are those temptations. You remember that bit? And then Satan said to Jesus, I want you to proskuneo, before me. And the idea is that Satan would be above Jesus, so that Jesus would recognize that Satan is above him. That's one element of worship. That we understand that we are in the right relationship with God, that God is there and that we are here. Now, it doesn't mean that God sees us as rubbish, but He loves us. We just got done singing that He died for us on the cross. But we're created beings, and God is the King of all kings and the Lord of all lords, and He's the creator of all. That's who God is. Do you see God as that? Do you see God for who He is? Do you see Him high and lifted up? Do you? That's an important part of worship. That is proskuneo. That is understanding our relationship, our position in terms of where God is. The most common one. But then there's another one. Latruno. Okay? If you want to try that one with me, on the count of three, latruno. 1, 2, 3. Latruno. This is the word that is translated worship, but it stresses the service of worship. Service. Because worship is just not some kind of emotional response. As a matter of fact, on Wednesday, we were at Swallowdale with Joyce, and as we say, Joyce and the gang. About a half a dozen folks all gathered around, and we were talking about what we talked about last Sunday. And we came to this thing of worship, and she kind of leaned over and she said, so worship is also us gathering here and doing what we're doing. I said, that's right, Joyce. I said, you've got it. So what we do in our lives also is part of worship. It is just not the 20 or 30 minutes that we're here singing songs. Yes, that's part of it. But do you, in your life at work, worship? And then I'm not saying you're there trying to, I know, where's Kate? Kate, if you're picking stuff for Amazon, I don't even know what you do. Whatever you do, picking things for Amazon, God, I'm going to thank you. No, I'm not. No. But we can have a spirit of worship. As a matter of fact, the Bible speaks much about our work. That our work should be directed as unto God as well. That everything that we do, everything that the believer does, we should do in the name of the Lord. So do you honor your employer in your work? Do you honor God in your work to your employer? If you're at college or school, do you honor God in the work that you do at school? Do we honor God in our worship and how we deal with our neighbors or how we are at the shop? Or for out driving. Has anyone else ever been on the road and you got a bit agitated because someone pulled out in front of you and maybe you said a few words or had a few actions and then, was that really worshipful to God? I'm not sure. So everything. Eric, that's a pretty heavy load. I know. But what I'm just trying to say that when we're talking about worship, it's just not coming here. It's everything that we do out there. Isn't that good? That's a good thing. That's a good thing. I mean, doesn't the Bible says, pray without ceasing? So this whole thing of the Christian life is a 24/7 thing. And I'm not trying to pressure you, but I'm trying to tell you that when Jesus said He came to give life and give it to the full, that means that the proper, real Christian life is living it out. That's where the fun gets. That's where the joy comes when we realize that, you know what, even when you face that difficult time or that difficult neighbor or that difficult boss at work, God is challenging each one of us. Am I worshiping as I deal with my difficult boss? or if I deal with that difficult person across the hall from where we live at Swallowdale. Is my life worshiping in everything that I do? That is that second word, latrueo. Expresses the service that we do. This comes in Romans chapter 12. Verse 1, when it says that we need to present our bodies as living sacrifices, which is our reasonable worship, latrueo. That we present our bodies as a living sacrifice. God doesn't want us a dead sacrifice, a living sacrifice. The second one. Number 3 is a bit easier to say. Sebo. Sebo. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Sebo. That's nice. Sebo, the dimension of this one is an awe, a devout respect towards God. The first one being to understand our position in relationship to God. God is high and lifted up. The second one is about what we do in our worship. The third one is about our understanding of respect and awe towards God. This shows up in Acts chapter 16, verse 14. There's someone called Lydia, and the Bible described her as a God-fearing woman, a sebo, a God-fearing woman. She had an awe, a devout respect towards God. The Bible says that she listened to Paul, then she and her whole household were baptized. She was that kind of a woman. She had that awe, that respect, devout respect towards God. But then there's another one. There's another one. Threskeia. Threskeia. Not so common, this one. Not so common, this one. This particular one is the formal religious activity, or the ceremonial. The ceremonial. Maybe like we do when we have the Lord's Supper. Okay? That is also a worship toward the Lord, but it's a different word. It's a different word. So this is important as well. And this shows up in Colossians chapter 2, verse 18. This word shows up, where Paul warns us about phony or empty religious shows. Be careful. You know what? There's nothing that the world hates more than showy religious people. Okay? We have to be very careful. We're not here to put on a show, right? We're not here to put on a show. We're here to speak truth, to encourage, to challenge, to worship, and everything that we do needs to be from the heart. That's what we want. That's what we want. If I'm going to go see a show, I go down to London and pay, £300 to go to the West End and see whatever. That's a show, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we come to church, when we do what we do, it's not for a show. It's not for a show. But what we do outside, there are those things that we do as in the various ceremonies that we did. When we had the 2 young ladies, when Peculiar and Emma were here, and we had a special dedication, that was a bit of a ceremony. And though that one had an element of worship as well. And we didn't want to put on a show and pretend that it was just doing something just to do it. There was meaning to that. And that's what we were on about there. But there's one last word. One last word. Now, it sounds like the very first one. This one is proskunetes. Proskunetes. And I want to ask you to do that. That's a bit more of a tongue twister. This one only appears once in the entire Bible. Once. But it's tied to that first word, which means to understand who you are in relation to God. That God is high and lifted up, and we are His created beings. This word appears in John chapter 23 when Jesus meets the woman, and it shifts from actions to identity. When Jesus said that God is looking for people who are worshipers to their core. If you're quick with me, turn to John chapter 24, and then we're going to dive right into Luke chapter 10. John chapter 24, I want you to see this because this is so important. This kind of wraps up everything that we've been talking about. John chapter 4, verse 23. Okay, this is the account about the Samaritan woman. John chapter 4, verse 23. Let's back up to verse 22. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is of the Jews. But then verse 23. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers, that's that word, the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship Him. So the point is that God is looking for people who are worshipers right down to the core of who you are. Right down into the heart. Right down into your mind. So that it's not for show. So it's not that the only time we ever think about God is Sunday morning, 10:30 to 11:30. But as she was speaking to Jesus, Father is looking for authentic, true worshipers right down to your core. Eric, does that mean that I have to feel like I'm on clouds all the time? No. Because we're made of flesh and bones, aren't we? And the emotions sometimes go up and sometimes they go down. I've been there. I've got a whole row of t-shirts to prove it, okay? But I think the test is, do we worship even when we don't feel like it? That is where the test is. That is where the test is. Okay, now that was a big sort of introduction. So the point is, worship is multidimensional. It's just not this singing thing. That's part of it. But it is understanding that God is high and lifted up. It is what we do on a daily basis. It is the ceremony that we have from time to time. But then the challenge is, are we worshipers right to our core? But we come now to Luke chapter 10, verse 38. And I absolutely love this account, this interaction between Martha and Mary and Jesus. Now, if you see other times that Martha and Mary appear, their personalities come out in the same way. So let's take a look at this. Verse 40. The Bible says, as Jesus came in, the verse 38 and 39 gives us an introduction. Mary and Martha were sisters. And the Bible says that in verse 39 that she had a sister called Mary who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard His words. Jesus comes into the house where Mary and Martha were. Where was Mary? Where was she sit? What was she doing? Sitting at Jesus' feet. What was she doing? Listening to His words. Is that a good thing, do you think? If Jesus came into your house today and was willing to give you a bit of a Bible lesson, would you be happy to sit and listen? Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? Here's Martha's problem. Notice in verse 40. But Martha was distracted with much serving. Is serving bad? No. Let's make sure we understand that clearly. Serving is not bad. Martha was distracted with much serving. And she approached Him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. Now, there's a lot there. We're going to go through this quickly to keep our time. Here's where her actions. The Bible says that she was distracted. That literally means that she was dragged around, preoccupied. She was pulled away. So that the service, are you ready? The service was more important than the object of the service. Do you understand what I'm saying? The doing was more important. There was an opportunity for Martha that she didn't realize. They had Jesus all to their own. And most of the time it's the crowds thronging in and Jesus speaking to thousands at one time, and you had to listen in and get one of those hearing aid trumpet things. You have to listen in to try to see what he's saying. But wow, he was in their house. Private audience with the king. Wow. But here is Martha, distracted, running from place to place with much serving. Much serving. Now, I probably as a good host, she's preparing all the food, right? Preparing the food and make sure that everything was just in order. Maybe the house was a bit untidy. So she was probably plumping up the pillow, sweeping the floor, or washing, I don't know. But all I do know is that there was Jesus, there's Mary sat on his feet, listening. And there's Martha running all over the place, not realizing the opportunity that she had. But what I find so funny is her request. Her request. Martha became bitter. I can imagine. For all of you who have had children, you can envision what this would have been like. Jesus, Mary's not doing her part. Will you tell her to do her part? Right? If any of you have had children, you told your children to do things. One would say, they're not doing their part of the work, right? You've been there before. And that's exactly what's going on here. Mary's not doing her bit, Jesus. Would you just tell her to get up and help me? It's just not fair. So, this is not a debate about serving versus worshiping. The serving is important, absolutely. But there's a time and a place for everything. Jesus was in their house. An opportunity beyond belief. And there was Martha running all over the place. This is not an issue about serving versus worshiping, but about balance and priorities. Martha should have realized the opportunity that she had. What do you think Martha expected from Jesus? Jesus, would you just tell her to get up and help me? It's just not fair. What do you think Martha expected? She wanted Jesus to say, come on, Mary, get up. You're so lazy. What do you think you're doing? That's what Martha expected. And she was there probably like, arms folded, nose in the air, maybe up on her tippy toes, just waiting for Jesus to say those words. And, as often happens, Jesus does not say what people expect, right? He often turns things upside down. Because we want to come to verse 41, we want to see Jesus' answer in verse 41. What does he say? And Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things. Now, I wonder the tone of his voice. I wonder his body movements. I wonder if it was something like this. I wonder if it, Martha, Martha, Martha. I wonder if it's that. Or I wonder if it was Martha, Martha, trying to get her, I don't know. I wish I had a video to know exactly what it was. We can all get so busy and get our priorities upside down. I know life is busy. I know life is busy. It's busy for me too. But to be victorious Christians, we've got to find a balance. We've got to make sure that time of quietness. Now, Jesus was a busy person too. How many times did Jesus say, okay, I'm done here. I'm going to go off over there by myself for a little while and pray? So Jesus showed us the importance of that. We have to be careful not to let the busyness steal our worship. Because Jesus said, you are worried and upset. You are worried and troubled about so many things. Sorry, I got behind there. You are worried and upset about so many things. Worry and busyness and everything crowding of us is going to steal our worship. That's what it does. Don't let it do it. I know life is busy. I get it. I get it. I always try to encourage people to, if the only time that you have with the Lord is a Sunday morning, you're going to become a very discouraged Christian. You're going to be a very dry Christian. And everyone's different. I get that. Everyone has different schedules. I understand that. But find something in your life. Find some routine, somehow, to be able to engage with the Lord, whether it be reading His Word, whether it be some songs, whether it be some reading, something. We have these Our Daily Breads out over there that can try to provide some help, some guidance, something to be able to so you can feed spiritually day by day. Then, of course, also want to realize that all of our life is worship. But that helps us to remember that all of my life should be worship. So it feeds off of each other. But if the only time we get anything is when we come here on a Sunday morning, we are going to be spiritually anemic. What does anemic mean? Anemic means you don't have enough red blood cells, right? You get tired and all kinds of things. So we don't want to be spiritually anemic. We want to have that in our lives. Jesus said, you're worried. Worry is the emphasis on the inside. He said, Martha, you're upset. The upset part is that word emphasis on the outside. Martha, you're just in absolute state. Got to get yourself together. But then the capstone here is in verse 42. Mary's choice. Jesus said, but one thing is needed. And Mary has chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her. Mary's choice. Now, I like to say this, that Mary chose the important over the urgent. What was important was that Jesus was in their house. Mary said, you know what? We can do takeaway. We don't have to worry about getting all the vegetables and all the meats and all the whatever and prepare all. We don't have to do that. Jesus is okay with a hamburger or some fish and chips from the Chippy down the road. It's okay. I don't care so much that the house isn't perfect. We have Jesus in our house today, and I'm going to grab the opportunity and sit down and listen to what He has to say. I'm going to do that. She made that choice. She said, that is going to be my priority right now. Sometimes we struggle with the important versus the urgent. The urgent is putting out all kinds of fires in our lives all the time. And sometimes what's important gets pushed to the side. I know I shared this some years ago, and maybe some will remember, but it's pretty much a new crowd now. I remember the very first car, the first car that I ever bought. It was beautiful. It was red, big sort of muscle engine. It was a 1973, and it had a sunroof. I was 18 years old. And I bought it with my own money from Moen Gardens. And you get in and you start that thing and it was cool. Okay? It was cool. And it was one of those kind of cars you could do all the work yourself. I mean, the bonnet was massive. I could crawl in there and sleep if I wanted to. Is that kind of thing. But now all the cars are all filled with all kind of stuff if you open it up, and no one can do any work anymore. But I could do virtually everything myself. And I was a kid. I didn't have a lot of money, so I did all the oil changes and all the stuff myself. And I had a friend who was getting married. And it was in the wedding. And I thought, I need to get to the wedding. But I also knew that my car needed to have the oil changed. And it just happened to I thought, I can change the oil and get to the wedding as well. I can do that. So I had this little routine. I had this little bucket. You'd put all the old oil in. You have to crawl underneath the car and you take off the little plug thing. You let the oil drain. You know? Does anyone know what I'm talking? I know Steve does. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. Well, that's the way it works. The engine, you have this thing in there. You have to take this thing off, and all the old oil comes down there in the little pan. You take it off, and you put it back into there, and then you put the new oil in. That's the way it worked. So I thought, I've got 6 minutes and 12 seconds. I can do this. Now, was it urgent that I change the oil? In my mind it was, because it was time to change the oil. Was it important? No, it wasn't important. It was important that I get to the wedding on time. So here it is. Throw my old clothes on, quickly get all my things, get underneath the car, take that thing off, oil comes out, quickly get that thing, put it back in there, go up to the top, put the new oil in, put it down. 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Yes. Go and change my clothes for the wedding, get it in my car, and I look outside, oil all over the floor. Turned out I had been in so much of a hurry, I didn't put the thing in properly. So all the oil came out. Now I'm thinking, what am I going to do now? See, I thought it was important to get that oil changed, but it wasn't. My priorities were all upside down. And I'll never forget that. So I learned my lesson. But Mary had the right priority. Jesus said, she's chosen the good part, the good portion. And I'm not going to take that away from her. Mary realized that she had that opportunity to sit at the feet of the Lord Jesus Christ and to listen to what he said. So in all of our wanderings and all the things that we do, we are called to worship. So worship is much more than just a Sunday morning, but it's what we do in our lives. It's what we do in our ceremonies. It's how we treat people at work or at home or our neighbors. All those dimensions. And so I want to ask us one last question as we finish up today. Are we multi-dimensional worshipers? Meaning, do I have all those different parts in my life? Do I worship in what I do at home, at work, at school, at university? Do I worship at Swallowdale in how I deal with people, the difficult people even? Do I, when I come here together, am I growing in connection with God? Is it all mechanical? Or do we want to grow in that way with the Lord? In our quiet moments, in our activity. What kind of worshipers are we? Because Jesus is looking for worshipers who are worshipers right down to the core.